So it's 1588. An empire so huge people said the sun never set on it unleashes this weapon of unbelievable power. They actually called it the Invincible Armada, and it was sent to crush one small, defiant island nation. What we're talking about here is a true clash of titans, a battle over faith and fortune that would absolutely change the course of history.
Okay, try to imagine this. You're standing on the English coast. It's July 1588. You look out to sea, and what you see is basically a forest of masts stretching across the entire horizon. The biggest naval force Europe had ever seen just showed up. And their mission? It wasn't just a battle, it was total invasion.
And the scale of this thing, it's just staggering. We're talking about 137 ships. They're carrying almost 30,000 men, plus thousands of cannons. For the English people watching, this wasn't just a fleet. This was basically a floating apocalypse coming right for them.
So you have to ask, how did it ever get to this point? A full-scale invasion like this, it doesn't just happen overnight, right? The truth is, this whole thing was fueled by a rivalry that had been simmering for decades. A rivalry between two of the most powerful and, let's be honest, stubborn rulers of their time.
So, in one corner, you've got King Philip II of Spain, at the time, pretty much the most powerful ruler on the planet. And in the other corner, Queen Elizabeth I of England. To Philip, she was this heretic queen who just refused to do what he wanted. And let me tell you, their conflict, it wasn't just political. Oh no, this was deeply, deeply personal. You see, you had two totally different worlds here. Spain was the global superpower, a massive Catholic empire just swimming in gold and silver from the Americas. And then you have England, this small Protestant nation that was kind of like the scrappy underdog, constantly poking at Spain's dominance at sea. It was two empires, two completely different faiths, and they were on an absolute collision course. And the list of reasons they hated each other just kept getting longer. Philip thought Elizabeth was a heretic who had no right to the throne. Elizabeth, for her part, was actively helping Dutch rebels fight for their freedom from Spain. Plus, you had these English privateers, guys like the famous Francis Drake, who were basically state-sponsored pirates raiding Spain's treasure ships. But the final straw, the thing that really pushed it over the edge, in 1587, Elizabeth executed her own cousin, Mary, Queen of Scots, who was Catholic. For Philip, that was it. It was the ultimate personal insult, and it was his call to launch a holy war. So that was it. In response, Philip gave the green light to this incredibly ambitious plan. And you've got to understand, this wasn't just about winning a fight at sea. Nope. The goal was the complete and total conquest of England. The official name for the whole thing was the Enterprise of England. Even the name sounds like some grand, epic quest, doesn't it? And that is exactly how Philip saw it. This was his crusade. He was going to drag England back to the Catholic faith by any means necessary. And you have to admit, the plan, at least on paper, was pretty brilliant. It really seemed unstoppable. So here's how it was supposed to go down. Step 1. The Armada sails right up the English Channel, just brushing aside any English ships that get in the way. Step 2. It links up with Spain's best soldiers, this elite army waiting in the Netherlands. But here's the really crucial part, Step 3. The Armada then becomes a giant shield, protecting this whole army as it crosses the channel on flat-bottomed barges. The target? A direct march on London. The sheer scope of this plan is just breathtaking when you think about it. This wasn't just about sailing from point A to point B. The idea was to create a floating bridge of military power, stretching all the way from mainland Europe right to England's front door. Okay, so the Armada enters English waters, and the fight is on. But it wasn't the big, decisive battle the Spanish were hoping for. Not at all. Instead, what unfolded was this week-long running battle, a chase, really, all the way up the English Channel. And right away, you see these two completely different ways of fighting. The Spanish tactic was all about getting in close, throwing out grappling hooks, and boarding the English ships. They wanted to turn this into a hand-to-hand fight, where their amazing infantry would dominate. The English, though, they were in these smaller, quicker ships. They knew they'd lose that kind of fight, so their whole strategy was the opposite. Stay away, use their superior speed to dance around the Spanish, and just pummel them from a distance with their long-range cannons. Now, to deal with this constant harassment from the English, the Spanish admiral came up with a really brilliant defensive tactic. He arranged the fleet into this tight crescent moon formation. The big, powerful warships were on the outside, acting as a shield for the slower, weaker transport ships in the middle. And for days, It worked perfectly. It seemed absolutely unbreakable. It was kind of like watching a pack of wolves nipping at the heels of a giant bear. The English ships would just dart in, fire off a few cannonballs, and then zip away before the huge, clumsy Spanish galleons could even turn to fight back. Super frustrating for the Spanish, for sure. But it wasn't actually doing enough damage to break that crescent formation.
So, amazingly, the Armada makes it pretty much all the way up the channel with its formation intact. But then it anchors off the coast of Calais in France. And right here, this is the turning point. This is the moment the entire campaign hinges on. The English were about to do something desperate and brilliant.
And this is where we see the critical flaw in that brilliant Spanish plan. See, the Armada showed up on schedule, but the army wasn't ready to go. Even worse, the barges they needed to carry the troops were being blockaded by Dutch ships. And these were small ships that could operate in shallow water, where the massive Spanish warships couldn't get to them. So suddenly, the Invincible Armada is just stuck. It's a sitting duck, anchored in a tight pack, just waiting. So this is the big question for the English commanders, right? Their long-range cannon attacks haven't really worked. They're starting to run low on gunpowder and ammunition, so what do? How on earth do you break that unbreakable formation? Well, their answer was as simple as it was terrifying. Fire. In the dead of night, they took 8 of their own ships, not worthless ones, their own warships, packed them full of tar, gunpowder, anything that would burn. Then they set them on fire and just sent them drifting on the wind and tide, straight into the heart of the anchored Spanish fleet. The effect was pure chaos. It was more psychological than anything. The Spanish sailors saw these blazing ships coming at them, and they feared they were hellburners, these floating bombs packed with explosives, so they panicked. In the absolute mad scramble to get away, Spanish captains started shouting orders to cut their own anchor cables. And just like that, in a matter of minutes, the unbreakable formation was gone. The fleet scattered, and they would never, ever get back into that defensive posture again. That fireship attack, that was the real turning point. The very next day, at what we now call the Battle of Gravelines, the English fleet fell upon the scattered, disorganized Spanish ships and just hammered them. But believe it or not, the real disaster for the Armada was only just getting started. With no way to link up with their army and their formation shattered, the Armada had only one option left: run. They had to flee north, and that long, horrible journey home would end up being far deadlier than any battle. In the end, almost a third of the entire fleet, something like 44 ships, would never make it back to Spain. And the human cost was just, it's hard to even comprehend. We're talking up to 20,000 men. These were the best sailors and soldiers Spain had, and most of them didn't even die in battle. They were lost to disease, to starvation, and to the absolutely merciless North Atlantic Sea. Because they were forced into the North Sea, their only way home was this incredibly dangerous route all the way around Scotland and the west coast of Ireland. And that's where they ran into ferocious autumn storms. The English cheekily called it the Protestant wind. And that wind, those storms, they finished the job. They did what the English Navy couldn't, just smashing ship after ship against the rocks. The defeat of the Armada was a massive turning point in history. It helped forge England's identity as a major Protestant sea power. But it leaves us with this huge question. What really doomed the Invincible Armada? Was it the genius of the English tactics? Was the Spanish plan just fatally flawed from the very beginning? Or, in the end, was it just bad luck and the terrible wrath of the weather? The real answer, as is so often the case with history, is probably a complicated mix of all three.